Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about cybersecurity and how you can improve your cybersecurity posture using a prioritized approach. So first and foremost, just a little bit of housekeeping. You can use the Q&A function in Microsoft Teams to submit questions throughout the event. We'll do our best to answer those questions as they come in, just so it's a little bit more informal and more of a discussion along the way. So let's talk about what we'll cover today. So we're going to talk about the current state of cybersecurity. We'll explore the most prevalent techniques and threats our Security Operations Center has observed in local businesses networks. We're going to talk about how cyber threats have transformed and where they're headed. We'll also do a demo of the anatomy of a breach, so you'll be able to witness a live hack. And then we'll wrap up with some cybersecurity FAQs like, I'm in the cloud, am I safe? Or I bought this tool, am I protected? And then we'll end with how to implement a prioritized plan to improve your cybersecurity posture. So I'm going to hand it off to Brandon Knorr, CTO and Certified Ethical Hacker of Success.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, like Vanessa said, I'm the CTO for Success Computer Consulting. A lot of my role here is really looking at, how do we solve problems for our clients and the technology we use, the processes we use, and I kind of look into the future and see, what's on the horizon that we can kind of start to bring in for our clients, and been really involved in the security framework and in building our security offering. So today, I think as we start to get into this, there'll be a theme here, and that theme is really about a cadence and really starting with the basics and moving through and paying attention to things on a regular basis. And so as we kind of get into this, I really want to just kind of set the tone for
Oh, Brandon, it looks like you might be muted.
Yeah, that's weird.
There you are.
Am I muted now? Okay. That's weird. I thought I unmuted. The CTO having technical problems. That's not embarrassing at all. So I'll go back a little bit. If I can. There we go. So again, I'm the CTO. A lot of my role here is really looking into the future, kind of pulling things in from a horizon perspective. And one of those things was security. And so I've been working with Chris and a team to help build our security, not only the frameworks, but kind of the cadence. How do we approach security? And so today I really wanted to start with the question, what is security? I think it's interesting when you ask this question, you get a lot of different answers. And for our purposes today, I kind of want to land on just kind of one aspect of this and define security as just risk management, especially in the SMB. And I think the best example I have here to kind of illustrate this is really around the idea that if you have a vulnerability that has $1 million in risk and it's only going to cost $50,000 to fix, you're probably going to fix that vulnerability. But if you flip that, if it's $1 million to fix but only proposes a $50,000 risk, you may or may not fix that. You might put some mitigations in, but you probably aren't going to pay $1 million to fix that. And so it's not about fixing everything. It's not about patching everything. It's about doing the right thing, spending the right money on the right things. And we'll kind of talk today a little bit about how do we get there. I like to start off also with myths. We hear these all the time. I'll kind of populate this real quick. These are the ones that I hear from our customers and our prospects and just speaking engagements I do. I hear all the time. It is, my data's safe, I'm in the cloud, I'm too small, I have nothing worth stealing, we have nothing to lose. My provider or my cloud services do that. There's you can't really pass the buck on security. You kind of have to own it, even if you're paying other people to or other services. You still have to ask those questions. The other one is I'm powerless. Like, this is just going to happen anyway, so I'm just going to buy some cyber insurance and be done with it. I'm not going to invest in any more than that. And these are all myths there, and we'll kind of talk through some of these as we go through this process. So why does security matter to SMBs, specifically the S and the SMBs? That's a lot of who our clients are. And I'll just populate these two. More than 70% of cyber attacks target small businesses. They know you're not spending money on this. You're an easy target. And this one's always interesting to me. Think about all the emails that you get on a regular basis, on a daily basis. 1 in 323 emails to small businesses are malicious. How many emails do you get a day that are potentially malicious? And then 70% of all breaches originate at the endpoints. This is huge. We talk in terms of inside the four walls and outside the four walls. Historically, before we were all remote, inside the four walls, you're protected by a device or set of devices at your perimeter, and it protects your servers, it protects your endpoints. Everybody inside the four walls had a perimeter device to the outside world that gave you visibility and insight and some detection in response to that. When we all went remote, all of our devices left the four walls, and did we have the right visibility and insight? Did we have the ability to keep those endpoints safe? Stats say no. We're doing a pretty terrible job there. What's interesting is if you look at the Verizon breach report, the latest stats say 22 days. If someone gets into your network, they're in your network 22 days. The good news on this is that's down from 140 days from the previous year. So then I get asked, well, that sounds like SMBs are getting better at detection, Brandon. You know, we're good. That's great. Thumbs up. That's actually not the case. The landscape actually changed. The attacks changed, and they became more kind of smash and grab, where they got in, they launched a ransomware attack, they asked you for money. Previous to that, it was they would get in, they kind of see what was going on, they would look at what was valuable. But now with the ransomware game, it's just so much more profitable just to get in and launch their attacks as fast as possible, generally deleting your backups first and all of that. So the last one that or not the last one, but a recent one that we responded to, it was 12 hours. From our evidence that they breached the network to the point they ran the ransomware, it was 12 hours. Overnight while nobody was there, of course. They learned enough in that time to actually delete backups and run ransomware. So the landscape's changed quite a bit. And a lot of the people doing this, I mean, you hear in the news about, you know, the pipeline and the meatpacking, the JBS, and, you know, they equate that to, you know, nation states like Russia or Iran or North Korea. But the reality is these are really organized crime, and it's about the almighty dollar. It's just trying to get money. And so what's generally coming after SMB is mafia, organized crime, that type of stuff. And I like to talk about the kill chain. One, it's cool to say kill chain, but two, it gives us a really great kind of model to go off of. Lockheed Martin created this a number of years ago. And the kill chain is a formula of how attackers get into an organization. And at least in my experience, and Chris, you know, can correct me if I'm wrong with what you're seeing in the SOC, but this is pretty formulaic and it's pretty standard. When they do some reconnaissance, they weaponize the attack, they deliver the attack, they exploit, they install whatever it is, software, footholds, whatever that is. The goal is to get to command and control, where there's an application either on the network or on a machine that then reports into a cloud service that the attacker can control. And then lastly, actions, basic hands on keyboard or actions on objectives. So they're basically in your network. Now they're starting to move laterally, elevate privileges, looking for those backups, trying to delete them, and then launch their payload so they can ransom you for a lot of money. And so when you think about this is the theme that we're kind of going to go with today. This is the anatomy. So the next piece, I think I want to introduce Chris Fernanda. He's going to come in and kind of talk a little bit about what the SOC is seeing. Now we see from an enterprise perspective in the news all the time, but it's hard to kind of connect what's happening in the SMB on a regular basis to the news. And it's easy for a leader inside of the organization to say, that doesn't apply to me. They're enterprise, of course, they're going to go after them. But I think I'll have Chris kind of walk through what they're seeing on a regular basis inside our SOC that serves small businesses and how they're defending against that. So Chris, you want to jump in here? And
Sure. Thank you, Brandon. So as mentioned, I'm Chris Vananda. I'm the cybersecurity architect at Success. I've been here almost 16 years. Like Brandon, I'm a certified ethical hacker, and I also have my CISSP, which is Certified Information Systems Security Professional. Part of my role is responding to incidents and leading those efforts on our team. And so what I'd like to do is go through what we've been seeing over the past year during the pandemic specifically. So there are two types of incidents that are extremely common. We've helped local organizations deal with ransomware. As Brandon mentioned, that's had a huge resurgence recently. And then business email compromise. That's when your Office 365 email, for example, gets compromised by an attacker to do things such as send malware to your contacts, try to initiate a wire transfer, things along those lines. And when you look at those two types of incidents, there's really four primary attack scenarios that we've been seeing. The first one relates to compromised credentials, coupled with lack of multi-factor authentication. And if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide there, thank you. The primary types of attacks related to this, the big one obviously is phishing. About 91% of all breaches begin with a phishing email. The other common one we see is when credentials are reused. About 40% of people use the same password on multiple sites, and a lot of those 40% use them everywhere. And attackers know this. So if there's a breach at, let's say, LinkedIn or Dropbox or another cloud provider, all of a sudden the attackers have a data set of potentially millions of email addresses and passwords that they know are going to work up to 40% of the time, no matter where they try it. So they'll take those credentials and try to log into things such as Office 365 or PayPal or anything else that's more valuable to them. And then the last are weak passwords. I've seen this several times where there was no evidence of a phish, no passwords found in the dark web, but their password was something like password 1 or fall 2019 or something along those lines, where it was obviously just easily cracked. An example of this on the news, I'm sure you've all heard about the Colonial Pipeline breach or attack recently. This actually began with a single compromised password. So there was a single user who had is actually a no longer enabled account, and their password was found on the dark web, and that was then tried it was used to log into their VPN, which was not protected with multi-factor authentication. So this ended up having a devastating impact on our economy and daily life for a lot of people. And it simply started with one simple, easy to target account. The next common attack scenario we see are vulnerabilities that are exploited. These can be things such as public-facing servers. Think of Microsoft Exchange or IIS. It also can be something as simple as a firewall that you wouldn't normally think of. This is one we ran into over the past year where there was a Cisco ASA firewall protecting the network. It had a vulnerability that allowed users to impersonate any other user they wanted, so they could easily just become an admin on that firewall. And we saw that lead to ransomware. And that's the exact scenario from this article here. Another common one, I'm sure you've all heard about the Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities earlier this year. What you may not know is within 5 minutes of those vulnerabilities being disclosed by Microsoft, attackers were scanning the entire internet looking for vulnerable systems. And that's very simple to do. For about $10, you can rent space on Amazon or any other cloud provider and have enough computing power to scan the entire internet looking for those vulnerable servers within just takes a few minutes to do. There's also companies that have databases of vulnerable servers where you can instantly do a search and find these. Furthermore, there was evidence that there were people attacking these servers before the vulnerabilities were even disclosed publicly by Microsoft. So it just goes to show how fast attackers work, and it's important to stay on top of things. patching and whatnot. The next common one that we've seen, number 3 here, unauthorized remote access applications. Think of this as shadow IT, where end users install applications to help them do their jobs more efficiently without approval of IT. The common ones that we've seen: TeamViewer, Log Me In, Go to My PC. And one incident in particular, we had evidence that the attackers got in through a TeamViewer account that someone had installed on a system. We saw in the logs that there were connections from another part of the country that were not initiated by the actual legitimate users of this, and that's how they got into that network, which led to ransomware. Earlier this year, there was an attack on a Florida town's water supply, and this all began through a TeamViewer account. So one of the staff members at this water supply plant had installed TeamViewer on their computer, and the attackers were able to get into that, probably at a simple password or reused password, no 2FA, and they got in. Thankfully for them, the citizens of that town, the attackers did this during the day. So the user was actually sitting at his desk, saw the mouse moving, and realized something was happening. But if this happened in the evening, we would have had a different story. Then the last one I want to discuss: vulnerable services exposed to the internet. So a lot of organizations will have legitimate secured services listening on the internet. For example, you might have a Microsoft Exchange server on-prem, you might have another web server, etc. But there's some protocols that are inherently insecure, and the most common one that we've seen is remote desktop. We've been brought into several incidents over the past year or two where attackers got in through a remote desktop server that was on the internet, and it's very, very easy to compromise those. If you put in a remote desktop server on the internet, you're going to see logon attempts beginning within a few minutes, and once they've been online for a little bit, thousands of failed logon attempts per hour. And so it's just a matter of time before those get compromised if they're on the internet. You see in this news article here, RDP attacks have been at record levels in 2021. This is all due to the pandemic, with people needing to work from home more frequently, where companies would set up remote access to their workstations or set up a remote desktop server, and they saw these attacks just skyrocket throughout the year. And as you can see, the main type of attack with these are just brute force attacks, where they're literally trying to smash in with passwords. So very, very easy to do. And those are the common types of attacks that we've seen over the past year. So with that said, I'll hand it back over to Brandon. He's going to go through a spear phishing attack with you.
Thanks, Chris. Interesting, it keeps muting me, and I didn't do that, I swear. We wanted to kind of go through and make this as real as possible for you. So we kind of talked about some statistics, kind of from a nation perspective or globally. Chris talked about some of the stuff that he's seen on a regular basis and in his team, kind of bringing it more down towards the SMB. And then we wanted to kind of go through, like, well, what actually happens during an attack? What actually goes on? What do they have access to? How does this actually work? You know, it seems to be a little abstract for most people. So I thought we'd kind of go through it. So today we're hackers. We're the team going against whatever company we pick. We'll go through this pretty quick. It's not super technical, but I think it's interesting to at least bring it in to some reality. So let me stop sharing my screen and then reshare for my demo. There we go. Okay. And just to lay this out a little bit, we have, and this is our, if you remember from our kill chain, this is our command and control. This is our hackers server in the cloud. And then we have our victim machine. Just to kind of give some context around this, I'm using a really old, I shouldn't say really old, but old enough attack here and a piece of software. It's very visual, which is kind of nice. A lot of the hacker tools are very command line driven. It's not very interesting to watch. So that's why we're using a little bit older. This is still very valid. This is exactly what happens inside of an organization. So we can kind of walk through this a little bit, and then hopefully the demo gods shine on us and this goes all without a hitch. So where I kind of want to start is the email. And this is just an email that anybody would get. And kind of going back to Chris's examples, we're seeing this too, where if a business email compromise happens, they may not compromise that company any further at that moment, but they'll use that to attack other companies. So if they understand your client list and they can start to send out emails to your clients as you, those emails become a lot more from a statistically speaking perspective to be clicked on and executed. So those payloads will get executed. And all I'm doing here is I'm sending an email that is some invoice and there's some sense of urgency to it. Please pay ASAP. Super simple. Generally, you just click on this, you download it or open it. And I've done that to save time. This is literally just a template that I downloaded from the Microsoft site. That's an invoice template. All I did in addition was I put this button in here. I wrote a little bit of code that launches our payload, and that's it. Right now, we're not infected yet. And if I go back to our hacker machine, there's nothing listed here. If I can, I don't think I can zoom in on that here, but there's no connection yet. But if I go back here and I click on this, and I want you to watch for the infection, see if you can see what happens. I'm going to click. We're infected. We have now taken over this machine. And it's very fast. Now, I could have had this happen on opening. So as soon as it opened, it infected the machine. It could have been a link, just a URL link, and it goes to a malicious site and it infects the machine. This is how fast and easy it happens. Now, if we go back here, now we have a guest. And I know that's probably hard to see, but there's a guest here. And I'm just going to open up the main tool set and kind of look at what we can do here. It's probably easier if I do that. And I just want to do a couple of things. So if I go back to the victim's machine, and I minimize this, and let me just go to like Wells Fargo, I'll refresh this. And I'd start typing SEC_ victim and some password, whatever you want. I don't have an account here or anything, but what I'm doing is since this is infected, it's starting to log data. It's starting to give me as an attacker information about your systems. So let's go back. Now I'm the attacker again. And let's see what we can look at here. So if I go into, let's see, we'll just go for some simple ones, spying. Let's just look at the keylogger, see if I can see anything already. There we go. Wells Fargo, victim, my user account, and the password. So now I have the password to your bank just by watching your system. I didn't really have to log in. I just could monitor it from the background here. Another one I can do is I can actually just watch your system. I can go in and I can capture. And again, now I'm looking at the remote system, just monitoring and see what's going on. If I go over to that system and then go back, I'm seeing what you're doing on your machine. So now I have access. So the whole goal as an attacker here, now I'm starting gathering information, enumerating the network. I'm starting to maybe run some scans, see what else is there, see what else I have access to. The goal is to typically move laterally and then elevate privileges. Get to the level of privileges where I can find your backups, delete them, and then launch a payload against you, typically ransomware. And so that I'm highly confident you're going to have to pay because I've understood your network. And again, one of the last ones we worked on was 12 hours to do that. Another thing I have access to is audio. I can record audio here. I can launch the webcam and watch what's going on. Yes, no, maybe so. See if it works through the, there we go. So now I have access to your webcam. I can see what's going on in the room, see if you're there, see if you're not there. And I think you can think of some other nefarious reasons for that too. Oops. I always forget this. I always forget to turn it off. There we go.
Brandon, we have a question.
Please.
I'm wondering if you can answer. So someone is wondering, how easy is it to hack MFA? Ooh,
that's a great question. I'll talk for Chris, but if I get this wrong, let me know, Chris. The MFA is a fantastic tool in the toolkit when you talk about a layered approach, and we'll kind of get there too. We'll talk about this a little bit later too. It's a fantastic tool, but it's just a tool. It can be bypassed. It can, a lot of what we're seeing is the attackers will annoy a user and then the user just clicks approve. Or they'll call them and they'll approve it over the phone. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly. So in general, simply having MFA enabled on an account, it's around 99, it's about 99% effective. Even if it's just a simple text-based MFA, it helps significantly. But Brandon's right. Over the past 6 weeks, I've witnessed my first 2 or 3 incidents where MFA was bypassed. In each case, it was what he said, it was a phone call. So for example, with Office 365, the primary method was a notification on the phone, but the option to have phone calls was still enabled. And the log showed that it called the user and she pressed the button to approve it. And she remembered getting the call. She thought that she said no or just hung up, but she must have accidentally hit the button. So it's possible. It's very effective. Everyone should have MFA, but it's like Brandon said, it's just an additional layer of defense. So.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions, Vanessa, as we're going along here?
That's it for now. We did have someone ask if this event will be recorded, and I just want to mention, yes, it will. You will receive access to this recording in an email after the event.
Awesome. Okay, so again, at this point in this attack, we have gone through, if you remember the kill chain, we've gone through the 7 steps. We've gone through the reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, installation, all the way down to hands-on keyboards. We are now inside the network and able to, if we have the appropriate rights, launch the attack against the network, encrypting it, and then the users will start to see typically either it's a desktop background that gets changed that says you've been ransomed, or it's a file that gets placed in that says you've been ransomed, and it says here's how you contact the attackers to pay the ransom and get your files back. And they actually even have help desks. You can chat with them and get help if there's issues. So let's kind of take this to the next phase. Let's go back into the slides. All right. So we attacked our network and whether it was our CFO or whatever clicked on the link, and now we have access. So the question is would you have fallen for this? And the answer is statistically, yes. I'll just populate these so we can talk about them a little bit. 48% of all email attachments are Microsoft Office files. So nearly 50-50 if you're going to get a Microsoft Office file. And exactly what we did here is we just sent an Excel file over email. It happened to be malicious. And 29% of all users fall victim to phishing attacks. That's a pretty high percentage. If I send out 100 emails and 29 of them get clicked on and I get some sort of access to most of those, that's pretty huge. 33% of all organizations hit by ransomware paid the ransom. That means that they didn't have proper backups. They didn't have the systems in place to defend against this. They were ripe for the picking. So let's talk about ransomware, since that seems to be the biggest thing in the news lately and really the biggest threat. The US suffers over 7 ransomware attacks an hour. Over 65,000 ransomware attacks in 2020. A successful attack has an average downtime of 19 days. And I can say that we see that in SMB, the ones we respond to, that we get brought in on to do incident response for, we see that. We might have some mitigations in place where they can do some sort of business, but their systems are generally down for 19 days or more. So, okay, you've been ransomed. You don't have any backups, you're ready to negotiate. What are some of the challenges with negotiating? Well, one, the ransom might be too high. You can't afford it. Insurance isn't going to pay for it all. You may be out of luck. Or you pay for it and you get the key and the key doesn't work. It doesn't unlock the files. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why this might be the case. One of those might be law enforcement is bringing down the servers for these attackers. Law enforcement is going after them. And we've seen that where the attackers have provided the key, but the key no longer works because it can't communicate with the server that the law enforcement brought down. This is the one that I think gets everyone. It may not be legal to pay them. There's legislation right now that's going through to make it illegal to pay anyone for ransom on this. But there's also cases where if the Bitcoin wallet or the wallet that you're paying to for the ransom is flagged as being part of a country or an area that funds terrorism, that's illegal for you to give money there. So you may not be allowed to pay the ransom. So things to think about there from a ransom perspective. All right, here we are. We've gone through a lot of doom and gloom, but there's hope. There's ways to protect yourself. And it's not about just buying blinky lights and putting them in the corner, and we'll kind of talk about that here. First is, where do I start? You got to do your backups right. Number one defense, backups. What do I go back to? It used to be this formula of 3-2-1. Three types of that, 3 backups, 2 types of media, 1 offsite. Here's what we found is that's a really good backup method. The problem is that the offsite has been getting attacked and deleted also. And the providers that do the backup for offsite don't have the systems in place to save those backups. Generally, when they're deleted, they're deleted. So you have to talk to your backup provider. If they're going offsite, make sure there's protections in the background that if they get deleted, there's a time frame of 7 days, 20 days, whatever that is, 30 days, before it fully deletes them, that you can actually go back and get them. The other one is offline, so that you're actually taking an offline backup, so that if you do get hit and all of the backups are gone, you have one that's offline that you can recover from. Maybe it's a week old or a month old, depending on your downtime tolerance or your recovery policies. But those are some of the things that you can do here from a protection perspective.
And just to clarify or add one thing with offline, that really means air-gapped. You don't want it to be accessible from a computer.
Good call. Yep, that's what I meant. And good clarification there for sure. The other piece is just to subscribe to a framework. And this is probably the biggest money saver that you could adopt. And it's because if you or your IT team or even your provider are just sitting there thinking about, well, here's the latest and greatest stuff that we can implement, and that's, you know, supposed to keep us safe. Frameworks are influenced by hundreds, if not thousands, of companies and security professionals from around the world that say this is proven to be a good practice. And it generally prioritizes it for you. So subscribing to a framework can save you a lot of time and energy and money at the end of the day, because you know you're basically funding the right things. Okay. A multi-layered approach is huge, and we kind of talked about this before. You know, MFA is just one piece of it. Another one I hear about all the time is, well, I bought this service, they put a blinky light box in the corner and we're secure. That's not security. There's a layer to that, and I'm not arguing that's not valuable at all, but that is not a security program. That is not a cadence around security and improvement. It's a part of the layer. So just keep that in mind. Implement MFA, we kind of talked about this already. MFA is one of the biggest things you can do from a prevention standpoint. Patch and update. This one still is, it blows my mind that this is still a problem, but this is. Something like 86% of all vulnerability-based breaches had a patch. It was already patched, but just people didn't patch. They didn't apply it. It was already there. All you had to do was keep up to date. And so that's huge. Reducing that surface area attack to like something like 14%, that's huge. This is one that people forget all the time, is living off the land. You have systems that have security built into them. If you're leveraging 365, there's so much potential in the 365 format or platform that you can leverage. You can start turning on security. You have to know how to do it. You have to know how to do it right. You have to know the pitfalls to it. But you're probably already paying for some really great things. I mean, MFA is one of them. Kind of back to Chris, we have a lot of companies that we work with that haven't turned on MFA. It's free to do that inside of Office 365 and M365. They just haven't done it because it's a burden to deploy and train users. Which brings us to the next piece: build a security culture. You got to train users, you got to test users, you got to monitor users. Testing users is about typically phishing attacks, but you can do a lot of other things there too. But the easy one is phishing attacks because it's the most prominent. Should test them, make sure they're learning, train them on what to look for, and then test them on what they're learning. The monitor is really important. We hear this one all the time. Microsoft published something not too long ago. Well, I think they've been touting it for a couple of years now. Is this passwordless world? You don't have to use passwords anymore. And that's cool and true if you're using those systems. But how many people or companies have legacy systems that don't support that? Passwords are here for a long time. And so monitoring the dark web for bad behavior or compromised passwords is huge. If you can see that a password's been compromised and change it, that increases your security posture drastically. So some of the language out there from Microsoft and some of the other Google and things like that, it's very, if you use our platforms 100% kind of language, very marketing. Not that they don't have amazing tools, it's just the reality is a little bit different, especially in the SMB. So just be cautious about some of that. Okay, going back up, talking about the framework, I'll introduce you to a framework. This is about, one of the things we wanted to accomplish in this presentation is to talk about how do you approach this? How do you take action today, right? And this is the CIS controls. I didn't get a chance to update these slides. This is they literally just last month updated it to the version 8. It's a slightly different version. The concept's the same. The CIS controls are a list of technical controls that you can implement that will drastically improve your security posture. The other thing that's really nice about them is that they are set in priority. They kind of tell you what to work on first. And there's a concept they call implementation groups, where they kind of say, if you fall into implementation group 1, you can pick these pieces, solve this, and then keep moving up to back to that cadence and that continuous improvement methodology. It's huge. This is from the CIS controls version 8, control 1, which is the hardware asset list. Just to give you an example of how prescriptive it is. It's very prescriptive on what to do. Usually at this time, this is when if I'm meeting with a board of directors or an executive team, this is when they start asking about, well, how much is this going to cost? How do we know we're spending the right money? And that's a tough question to answer, but I think this slide here provides a little bit of guidance. And what I'll talk about this slide is, one, it's labeled by sector, which is nice because if you fall into that sector, what are you spending in technology from a budgetary standpoint? But the thing I want to point out about this is an average. So you have really mature companies in here and you have immature companies in here. So I would argue that if you're not spending at least average, you're especially in your category, you're probably underspending. So hopefully this kind of gives you some context and some help around, how much of your revenue should be going to IT budgets. Obviously, that's just a starting point. You might go up or go down, but hopefully that helps. So we're kind of coming to the end here, and I wanted to really kind of leave you with some philosophies. And I've mentioned it a couple of times. It's this idea you can't buy security. You can't pay me $1 million today and be secure tomorrow. It takes time. You have to change behaviors. You have to implement policy. You have to monitor policy, change behaviors. It's this continuous improvement. And I generally can't do it by yourself, especially in the SMB. You need help. You don't have even if you have the best staff, they're generally overburdened with serving the users. If you have IT staff, and security is a tough thing to add on and pay attention to. So they probably need help with that also. Not that they can't be a part of it. There's two halves of a whole there. You need good management and good security. This one I hear all the time. We have insurance, we're fine. You can't insure it away. It doesn't work like that. And I'll give you some we've been involved with a number of incidents. And when it comes down to the insurance company's goal is to pay you as little as possible to the letter of the policy. And if anything falls outside of that, it is a fight to get them to pay it. Sometimes you can fight that, but you should only consider your insurance as the last safety net. Everything else failed, and it's just to protect those last bits, those revenue pieces, or help with ransomware and things like that if you get to that. But I would not count on that as your security solution. I think you'll find your company would be in a really bad place if that's the way you approached it. And then back to this idea, security is a journey. It takes time. And again, I keep preaching this, it's behavior. You have to start to understand whether it's from an assessment or just a regular cadence of looking at security. What are our holes? What's going on in the industry? And how do we start to solve these? I think MFA is a prime example of this. We still have a lot of challenges and pushback against MFA. MFA is the cheapest and one of the most effective ways to start this journey. And we still get a lot of pushback to that. It does affect users. There's ways to do it that is doable from a user perspective, but it does take energy and time to focus on it. So it's one of those things you have to, I think the only thing I can equate it to is health. There's no such thing as buying health. You can't just buy into a healthy lifestyle. You have to do it. You have to do it over time. If you get to a point where you're not healthy, there's no buying the health. Healthcare can help, insurance can help, but it's about doing the right things, doing the right behaviors from an exercise and eating perspective. So those are, I think that's one of the best analogies I can have there. It's just about taking the journey and staying on the journey and the discipline of the journey. So just like health and fitness, the best thing you can do is start your journey today. And it looks like we're finishing right on time, 45 minutes, to the nose. Now we have about 10, 15 minutes for questions. Happy to stay around and answer any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen. Oh, one last thing, sorry. We do include this, and if you want the slides, we can give those out. Just some links to really helpful sites. Have I been pwned is you can put your email in there, see if it's been breached. CIS controls, the link to that site. NIST is another framework we really like that we've worked with. And then just some articles we've written on password managers and creating a secure password. So just some nuggets to take away there. Feel free to ask questions.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm not seeing any questions come through right now, but we'll wait a little bit and give people some time to submit those. One question
go ahead.
That we hear frequently, this is kind of broad, but often we hear, I'm in the cloud, aren't I safe? Like everything, all my business applications are in the cloud. We have Microsoft 365. What do I have to worry about?
Well, the thing that the dirty secret about the cloud is just someone else's computer, and you still have to worry about, backups. We just ran into this not too long ago with an incident response where it took us weeks to have Microsoft recover some SharePoint libraries. Luckily we were, but it was touch and go there for a while to actually recover those. And so it's just because you're paying somebody else to host something doesn't mean that it exempts you from paying attention to what good security looks like. You have to ask the questions around it. You have to look at your downtime tolerances and recovery time policies and really understand, what are our capabilities with the spend that we have right now? And then, what do we want? What's right for the business? And so, we already talked about a couple other breaches. When you talk about business email compromise, that's a cloud service. If you're not turning on all the services to help you, like MFA to protect you there, that's you're not safe, right? But there's a layered approach to that. You can turn on some of those services. You can monitor certain things. So I'll give you an example. One of the things we monitor in our services is email forwarding. If our email forwarding gets turned on, we get an alert, and so we can ask, were you meant to do this? If not, then we know someone's been in and compromised that mailbox. So there's just things that you can do when you start looking at it from a perspective of owning the security piece and asking those questions and using a partner to guide you for sure. But yeah, did that answer your question?
That did, and that actually sparked another question. So we have someone asking, should we be backing up cloud services like Office 365 and Salesforce? This is very relevant.
Very relevant. Yes, yeah. And so you should be looking at what that service provides and guarantees you from a recovery perspective, and then compare it to your downtime tolerances and your recovery perspective. And so if it doesn't match, then you have to have a third party to help there. If it matches, then fine. You just have to be able to test that and make sure that they're adhering to those. So whether it's quarterly, annually, or every 6 months, you're testing your backups, whether they're on-prem or cloud services. You should be testing those.
All right, we have another question.
I love it.
Do you have an opinion of the value of utilizing an application, like, for example, Securance, versus turning on all the services within Microsoft 365 and Azure to limit spoofing and attacks?
Yeah, we found most companies, it's sufficient in the M365 world. That's not to say that there's not a reason to use the other. We've used Securance for years, and it's a great solution. One of the ways that you can use a solution like Securance is if all your mail is going to that place first or second, depending on where it lands in the chain. But if it's first, if 365 goes down, then you can still get your mail. You can point it somewhere else, or I believe Securance has like a little web UI where you can actually still go get your mail while the other system's down. So it's kind of a DR play, but disaster recovery play. But it depends on where you put it in the chain. Obviously, if it's after 365 and 365 goes down, then you're still not getting it into the Securance. So there's still a play there. There's still a reason that you would use one of those solutions, because the other pieces in M365, you're kind of relegated to the way they look at it and how they apply the heuristics and the rules. And Securance, I think you have a little bit more control over that. So there's still reasons why you'd use another one. I'm using Securance kind of as a placeholder for any other ones. But we do find most of our clients, it's sufficient within M365.
Thank you. And then we have another question asking, if we're going to get the slides with the recording, and you mentioned we can make those available. So I'll make sure of that. We'll also provide some other helpful resources that we have on our Knowledge Center that talks about the topics we discussed today. But other than that, I think that's all the questions we've received so far. Oh, and someone wanted to mention, Brandon, that they like your V for Vendetta art in the background.
It's an artist by the name of Butcher Billy. It's a great artist.
What a great name. All right, so if we don't have any more questions, we can wrap up a little early. As always, if you have lingering questions after this presentation that you want to get answered, you can always email info@sccnet.com, and we'll make sure to route those questions to the appropriate resource. If you're a current customer, you can always reach out to your account manager. And we're happy to help.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.